You and I tender the letter from the Bishop to Mr Cone dated the 15th of August 1996.
For the exhibit 44-8.
Thank you. Now, Bishop, I was asking you questions about the society. Now, the society was ultimately closed down by you, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
When was that?
Probably 1996, I think.
Perhaps if I can help you with some information I have, which is December 1994, which would be
as early as that, yes.
Shortly after the execution of the search warrant.
December 1994, yes. Yes, well, my memory of it is that following the revelations and the determinations that I made late in 1993 and early 1994, a number of the brothers left, a fairly small contingent remained, and they elected Brother Morris Taylor as their superior. It could have been as few as 5 or 6 remained. A number left in the process. And, well, I thought the charism was still sound, that the idea of a group of men and women who would devote themselves to the teaching of Scripture in state schools. So I encouraged them to continue on, but in the event it didn't prove to be possible. Several of the brothers joined other congregations and the others just dispersed. And likewise with the sisters. I provided some assistance for them through competent religious leaders, but they too decided that they didn't have a future together. They thought that the whole project had been too much damaged by what had happened, and they decided to disperse.
How many were there when it was first established?
I don't think there were ever more than about 20, 25. It never reached a larger number than that, I think.
How many were convicted of sexual offences?
3.
And the others either left of their own accord during that period of time, the early 90s, and there were 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 left when you closed it down?
That's right, yes.
What did you have to do in order to close it down?
I had to write to someone in the Vatican. I think the head of the Congregation of Religious, it is. All religious societies, even those that are of Dawson Rite, are somehow registered and recognised there as existing. So I think I had to write to a cardinal there and get approval for its dispersal, and he granted that.
What reason did you give?
I think I gave the breakdown of the religious life and its standards in the community.
In a negative sense?
Yes.
By reference to the convictions or charges?
Yes, that's what I didn't. I don't know that I used those terms exactly, but that's the sort of thing I had in mind, yes.
So the reason you closed the order down was that there were allegations against many of the 20 and 3 were convicted or were charged at the time?
No, there were. I'm not aware there were any allegations against any others besides the 3.
I see.
Yes. But the whole incident, as you can imagine, had affected everyone in the society, even those who initially were sceptical and very critical of me for taking the measures I did, because they didn't believe it happened. Even they eventually became disillusioned with the history of which they'd been a part and didn't want to be any further part of it, really.
So the 3 who'd been convicted, Joseph Pritchard was one.
That's right.
And he was a senior member of the society?
He wasn't one of the founding ones. As far as I recall, Brother John Sweeney gathered a few around him to begin with. I'm not sure at what stage Joseph Pritchard joined them, but he wouldn't have been one of the first group, I don't think.
And Brother Sweeney, who was also convicted, he was, as you say,
John Sweeney,
a founder of it. Yeah. And who was the third one?
The third one was Stephen Robinson.
And he was a senior member as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. I have nothing further.
Does anyone else have any questions? Mr Gray. Anyone else? Yes, Mr Gray.
Bishop Heather, as you know, my name is Gray and I represent the Truth, Justice and Healing Council and the Diocese of Armidale and the Diocese of Parramatta. Yesterday at one stage, in relation to Farrell, you were asked some questions about the time at which he initially came to your diocese and found himself at Kenthurst. Remember that?
Yes.
And there were some questions about what balancing of factors you may have engaged in or should have engaged in terms of whether you should or shouldn't have accepted him when Bishop Manning asked you to. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes. Bishop Kennedy.
I beg your pardon, Bishop Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Sorry, my mistake. Bishop Kennedy. Now, I just want to check with you that I've understood your evidence correctly in terms of what you knew at this time, that is mid to late or 1989, just before he went to Kenthurst, about his previous history. So you knew that there had been a charge or charges against him which had come to court in Narrabri?
I did, yes.
And that, as you were told, is this right, was by one complainant or one victim?
I don't recall exactly whether it was one or more.
All right. And you were told by Bishop Kennedy that Farrell had been acquitted.
Yes, right.
So was it your understanding then that the charges, whatever they were against him, had been found by the court to be unfounded or disproved?
That was my understanding at the time, yes.
So your understanding, which we all know now turns out not to have been right, was that Farrell was innocent of those charges?
That's how I saw him at that time, yes.
And you also were told by Bishop Kennedy that a psychologist had given him a clearance, as it were,
Yes.
that he was suitable to be deployed in a parish.
Yes. Yes.
And you were also told by Bishop Kennedy that he, Bishop Kennedy, considered him appropriate and suitable for appointment.
That's right, yes. That he made a great recovery, if I remember the words rightly, and that he hoped to have him back in the diocese in 12 months.
Now, at that time, is this right, you had no knowledge then of there ever having been any other complaints or concerns about Farrell by a number of boys back in 1984?
No, I had no idea of that.
All you knew about was the one set of charges which had been dismissed, as you were told.
Yes, I learned of the other events through the Whitlam report.
Yes. And then, well, before I say that, so at the time you appointed Farrell or accepted him into the diocese in 1989, in your mind there was no question or possibility of his being a pedophile, is that right?
Well, possibilities pretty throwing a fairly wide sheet out, but no, I didn't consider he was a pedophile, no. It's very difficult for us now, I suppose, when we're dealing with a person who is a convicted pedophile and facing further charges in the future, over whom there have been several inquiries. It's difficult for us to recognise that, but at that time, in 1989, I regarded him as an innocent person, yes.
And also at the time, just in relation to pedophiles or pedophilia generally, you've given some evidence yesterday about the general extent of your knowledge on that sort of subject then as opposed to now. And one of the things that you understand now, is this right, but did not know then, was the compulsive or repetitive facet of pedophile behaviour.
Well, that's true, yes. I think all of us have come to know a lot more about this condition than we knew perhaps then. Certainly I have. I should put that. I have come to know a lot more about it, yes.
So there's a general awareness now, and perhaps has been for a while, that if someone has abused a child, one child, there is a strong likelihood that he has abused more than one and will abuse more than one.
Yes.
But is that something that you were conscious of in 1989?
Oh, certainly not, no. But I've become conscious of that now.
And another thing that people have become much more aware of, certainly by now, is the terrible nature and extent of the likely damage to a victim, including the long-lasting aspects of that damage of sexual interference by an adult. Is that something that you were conscious of then? That is
I wasn't conscious of it then, but I'm very conscious of it now, and of course it was reinforced by what I heard earlier this week here.
Now, moving to a different topic, I wonder if tab 80 could be called up, please. This is the minutes of the consultants meeting of 22 November 1989, and it's on the second page, about two-thirds of the way down. You were asked about this entry, which reads, as a result of discussions, Bishop Bede said that Father John Farrell has been appointed for 1 year to Kenthurst. Now, yesterday afternoon you said you thought that that phrase, as a result of discussions, referred to discussions with Father Dixon.
Yes.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes, that's right.
Might it have referred to discussions with Bishop Kennedy?
That's possible, yes. I don't have any recollection of that, but it's possible.
Thank you. Then could we have tab 99, please? Now, it might take a moment to read this, but this is a letter from Father Peters of Armidale to Bishop Kennedy of Armidale on the 23rd of October 1990. And if the bishop could be scrolled down so the bishop can read it, you can see that Father Peters is telling Bishop Kennedy about discussions with Father Usher, about the recommendation of Dr. Brzezinski, and so on. In relation to, you see in the first paragraph, a professional person to give a second opinion about Farrell.
Yes.
Did you ever either see that letter or were you told about its contents?
No, I had no knowledge of that at all.
And we have in the tender bundle various other documents which show correspondence between Bishop Manning and Farrell in 91-92 about getting a second opinion, that is from someone other than Mr. Boyle. And were you ever aware of any such discussions or proposal?
No, I was not aware of those discussions.
Then could we have tab 147, please? This is Bishop Manning's note of a conversation with Professor Brzezinski on the 12th of June 1992. And could you take a moment to read that and see what Professor Brzezinski was telling Bishop Manning?
Yes, I see the part of that letter made available there.
Yes, and in particular the two paragraphs starting to paint a true picture.
Yes.
You've just read those. Now, were you aware or were you told by anyone of the contents of what that note
I
was?
was not, no.
Now, as it happens, mid-June 1992, this is just after you had heard from Father Archimone about
Yes, that's
his
right.
concerns about Farrell in Marylands.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right, almost contemporaneous.
Almost. And you acted, as we've heard, in response to those concerns, the Archimone concerns. You took action in response
I did,
to that.
yes.
And that was without knowing anything about Dr. Brzezinski's views.
Yes, yes.
Now, just finally, you were asked some questions this morning about the letter to Mr. Cohn of Makinson and Dapperchi, Exhibit 44-8. We could have that. In the second paragraph, you start off by telling Mr. Cohn that you did inform CCI officially of potential claims in relation to in regard to this case being the Cattell case. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you go on to say what we were asked to do at the time was to write to Father Peter Connors of the Professional Standards Committee. Now, and I'll come to the rest of that sentence, but pausing there, you say that this I did, that is, write to Father Peter Connors, you think in 1994. Do you have a memory of writing to Father Peter Connors about some such matter?
Your Honour, I note that my friend appears for the Diocese of Armidale, the Diocese of Parramatta and the Truth, Justice and Healing Council. I ask on whose behalf he is asking these questions.
I'm asking the questions for the moment on behalf of the Council because I've been given to understand that Council, who is here representing Bishop Heather personally in relation to the St Gerard Majella matter, is not briefed with information about the Cattell matter.
That is correct. I have no information about the Cattell matter.
It's an odd Chinese split, but I'm not going to say any more.
It has occurred this morning, Your Honour. I won't. My questions will take another minute or so. I won't
Very
be
well.
pressing this. So do you remember that you did write to Peter Connors?
No, I don't remember that. It's
All right.
many years ago, and I don't
Very good.
recall that.
Well, let me just ask you this then, cutting to the chase. In the last sentence, or sorry, second last sentence, you refer to destroying certain papers. First of all, do you have any recollection at all as to what sort of quantity of papers were involved?
I think it's a very loose sentence that I've written there, and I must apologise for that. I haven't written that as carefully as I should have done. No, we didn't go through any shredding process in the diocese, but following the carrying out of the warrant, I did become very nervous about the diocesan file.
And you were asked this morning about the criteria or criterion which you used to think about what might be destroyed or not kept, and you used the word confidentiality. Do you remember that? Now, did that criterion or those criteria relating to confidentiality include destroying documents because they might indicate some possibility of criminal behaviour with minors?
No, not at all. Not where minors were concerned, no.
Bishop, I don't quite understand. This morning you told me you didn't recall what you destroyed, but you now seem to have recalled.
No, what I'm aware of is that in 1996 I was quite conscious of the obligations to report offences, sexual offences against minors.
But the discussion this morning was about the documents you destroyed as soon as the police had conducted their raid. You understand? And that's what this letter's talking about too.
Yes, well, it's a very loose sentence, I must admit, and I apologise for that.
Well, it seems pretty clear, Bishop, that, and we discussed this before the break.
Yes,
You see, at the moment the position seems to be that you've destroyed documents that might say something which would be adverse to an individual, and thereby you saw that as necessary to protect the confidentiality of that material.
yes.
Now that would include potential criminal offences, wouldn't it?
It could, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's plain that that was one of the matters, isn't it, that you were concerned not to have a record of?
I accept your assessment, Your Honour.
Were criteria that you had in mind matters such as where a document recorded some private matter like referable to alcohol or depression or those kinds of matters?
Matters of that sort, yes.
Do you recall that being the principal concern that you had?
The principal concern was the confidentiality, yes. That people would write to me on a confidential basis, sometimes include a medical report to support their assessment or their request to take leave for a time, and they were very confidential disclosures.
But the matters that were relevant to CCI, they were all potential claims against the Church for failing in its duty of care to individuals, weren't they?
The matter with CCI, yes.
Yes.
They were,
And central to those was sexual abuse, wasn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
Just on that, though, not cavilling with that, you, according to this letter, had provided the information relevant to this matter to Father Connors so that he could provide it to CCI.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
That's right, yes.
Yes, I have nothing further.
It's just something that arises from the questioning in relation to Bishop Manning.
Sorry, I can't hear that.
Sorry. There are just a couple of issues that arise in response to questioning by Mr Gray in relation to Bishop Manning. May I?
Yes, very well.
All right, thank you. Bishop, my name's Geraci and I represent Bishop Manning.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask a few questions. One is this. Your evidence was that as at September 1990 you had become nervous about Farrell's placement in your diocese. Do you recall giving that information?
I do, yes. Yes.
Bishop, in April 1991, at the Bishops' Conference, a presentation was made in relation to a new protocol then being implemented by the Church for dealing with matters of this sort, correct?
Yes. I think so, yes.
Yes. Would you, the records indicate that you attended the Bishops' Conference at that time in April 1991?
I did, yes.
Yes, all right. So you were aware as at April 1991 that matters of concern to you could be taken to the Special Issues Committee?
Yes, yes.
And also as at April 1991 that the Church's protocol that time was for those matters to be centrally managed, correct?
What?
To be centrally managed. Pardon?
To be centrally managed.
Centrally managed.
I said yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was aware of what took place at that conference, yes.
Yes. And I'm just asking that one of the matters that was raised by this new approach by the church was that the church was exhorting its bishops to take those matters to the special committee who had the relevant expertise in order to know how to respond to them, correct?
That would be correct, yes.
All right. Now, you were asked about whether you're aware of a conversation between Bishop Manning and Father Blazinski, which was the document at tab
Yes.
136 on the 15th of April 1992, and that sort of information coming to an ordinary would be the very sort of information that should be taken by the bishop to that committee. Would you agree with that? Sorry, I got that wrong. 135, my apologies. See that. That was a conversation had by Bishop Manning with Professor Blazinski.
Yes.
And that is receiving that sort of information. That is the type of information that the bishop was required under the new protocol to take to the Special Issues Committee.
Yes. Advised or required?
Yes.
Advised, perhaps, yes. Not required, I think, but advised.
But in any event, if we then look at tab 136, did you then, as at that date, recognise that Brian Lucas was one of the members of that committee?
Yes, I knew that Father Brian Lucas was a member of that committee.
Okay. I'll leave that questioning. Just finally, you asked the following, that at the time you received the information in or about June of 1992 when you terminated Farrell's ability to...
Terminate his appointment.
Yes, his appointment. You asked some questions about the withdrawal of faculties by Bishop Manning. In fact, one of the other things at the time was that Father Farrell was planning to travel, wasn't he, and go on holidays.
He was, yes.
And the bishop's withdrawal of his faculties would, as far as the bishop was able, ensure that he was should not be able to practice as a priest anywhere else whilst he was travelling.
That's correct, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Venice?
Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes, very well. Thank you, Bishop. That concludes your evidence. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour, I call Bishop Luke Mathis.
Your Honours, I and those who instruct me have now been asked to appear for Bishop Mathis. As presently informed from the tender bundle and the conferences I've had with him, we don't perceive any conflict with my other client, Father Lucas. I believe a written application for leave to appear was sent yesterday.
I have no objection to leaving.
We'll give you leave. You just keep your eyes open if any problem emerges.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Bishop, it's necessary for you to be sworn. Will you take an oath on the Bible?
Surely.
Would you repeat after me, please? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give to this Royal Commission
that the evidence I shall give to the Royal Commission
shall be the truth, shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat.
If you have any difficulty hearing, Bishop, will you make it clear?
I have intermittent difficulty to hear, but I can hear you now, yes.
And if you need a short adjournment for any reason, please tell us.
Yes, okay.
Now, your full name
Full name is Luke Mathis.
and what are you currently doing, Bishop?
I'm, what do they call him? Emeritus Bishop of Armidale.
Thank you. Now, you were first ordained as a priest in South Africa
Correct.
and you were incarnated in Melbourne in 1976.
That would be right.
And you went to Armidale as a bishop soon thereafter.
No. 1999 I was appointed Bishop of Armidale.
Thank you. What did you do between 76 and 1999?
I worked as a priest in the Archdiocese of Melbourne.
For that entire time?
Pardon?
For that entire time you were there.
Yes.
And you were appointed Bishop of Armidale when?
I was appointed in March 1999 and ordained Bishop in May 1999.
Who was your predecessor as Bishop
Where?
at Armidale?
Well, there wasn't a bishop there when I was appointed.
Who was there?
It was a vacant diocese, and Monsignor Frank Ryan was the administrator.
Do you know how long he had been administrator before you arrived?
Just short of 2 years.
And he took over from Bishop Manning, is that right?
Well, I don't know about taking over. Bishop Manning was told to go to Parramatta, I understand, and in that event there was no bishop, so an administrator had to be appointed.
So he was the next person in the Armidale diocese running it after Manning, Bishop Manning.
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Now, you were Bishop of Armidale for some 12 years,
Yes.
and then you retired.
Well, I tendered resignation to the Holy Father, the Pope, at my 75th birthday as required by church law. And within a month I got a letter back to say I was to continue until they made other arrangements. So the technical term is nunc pro tunc. So I remained Bishop of Armidale until the next appointment came.
How long was that?
Oh, well, no.
Months?
Oh, no, it was more than months.
Years?
No, terrible, I can't think. No, there's a question. The current Bishop, Michael Kennedy, was appointed, and I think that might have been in 2012.
Now, when you were appointed, when did you first hear of Father John Joseph Farrell?
Oh, only when I got to Armidale. I'd never heard of J.J. Farrell before.
What did you hear when you got to Armidale?
I'm sorry?
What did you hear when you got to Armidale?
Well, when I came to Armidale, one of the first things I did was to issue faculties to the priests who were administering priestly functions in the diocese. There were a few people there who didn't belong. They had just parked themselves there. So I did not issue faculties to J.J. Farrell because I'd been told there were things against him, and by then I had learned that they had tried to laicise him, but that didn't go on. So of course I asked why they wanted to laicise him, and I was told various things.
When you say you were told various things, was that by previous office holders in the diocese or others?
Probably by the people in the Chancery office. I can't remember who told me.
Do you remember now what you were told?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember now what you were told about him, about Farrell, when you arrived?
That I was what? I'm sorry.
Told.
What I was told?
Yes.
Well, that they had tried to laicise him.
Why? Did they tell you why?
Yes, because they said that he was had been fiddling and playing with young boys, etc., etc., and that complaints had been received, etc.
Now, at the time that you began, he had his faculties removed, is that right?
No, I didn't use that term. I said I didn't issue him faculties.
I understand that. I'm asking you whether at the time you began as the Bishop of Armidale, he had had his faculties withdrawn.
I don't know that.
Well, if you were considering whether or not you would restore his faculties, they must have been withdrawn, mustn't they?
Well, I don't use the term to restore his faculties. I just did not issue faculties to him and some other priests who were in the diocese.
But if he had his faculties, there'd be no question of you issuing them.
No, I'm not sure. There may be something we're missing here. Do I assume when you became the bishop that it was incumbent on you to issue faculties to all of those in the diocese who were serving as priests, if you chose to?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But that's what a new bishop does, is that right?
Well, I did. I don't know what other bishops do.
But you did. So you issued faculties to every priest, but for those you didn't want to issue faculties to.
Well, you could put it that way. Obviously, there was a few other priests who'd parked themselves there because they either didn't get on where they were or they thought it was better to be there and so on.
So you left them off your list too?
That's right.
So was Father Farrell living in your diocese at the time when you arrived?
I think so, yes.
Was he doing anything of a priestly nature that you knew of? Did you know what his status was as a priest?
I'm not sure what I understand your question.
He was a priest of the diocese?
Yes.
What did that mean he couldn't do?
Well, he had no faculties.
I understand that. That's why I'm asking you, what could he not do and what could he do as a
He
priest?
could not function publicly as a priest.
And what does function publicly mean?
Well, saying mass and hearing confessions and visitations and that sort of thing.
Is there anything he could do as a priest without his faculties?
Well, he could say private mass at home if he wanted to.
He could wear his priestly garb,
What do you mean by priestly garb?
priestly clothing.
You mean this sort of thing?
Well, if that's the only thing that is worn by a priest, yes.
Yes. If
He
he
could wear
wanted
that.
to, well, why not?
Well, I'm asking you, Bishop. He
Yeah, well, he
wear
could do that.
And he could call himself a priest.
Oh, yes, he was.
Thank you. Now, there were various events or incidents concerning Father Farrell during your time as bishop that I wish to take you to. Now, there's a screen in front of you. If you wish to see a hard copy, I will provide you with one.
Well, let's try this first.
So perhaps if we can have tab 220 on the screen. Now, this is a letter from the Diocesan Director of Catholic Schools to Farrell in March 2000, telling him that he did not have permission to enter Catholic schools for the purpose of assisting teachers and students with projects. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did that come to your attention, that he was doing such things?
Oh, yes, I was all in favour of that.
You're in favour of what?
That letter be issued.
So you knew about it before the letter was issued?
I'm sorry?
You were consulted before the letter was issued?
I don't remember that.
The letter says you were consulted. You'd accept that you were, I take it, Bishop?
Well, I probably was. I don't know.
Was it the case that entering Catholic schools for that purpose was something that he could do, notwithstanding his faculties were withdrawn?
Well, he should have. He should have understood that.
So that what he was doing was inconsistent with his faculties having been withdrawn, is that right?
But it doesn't say that he did go to schools.
Well, it's clearly the case that the permission wouldn't have been withheld unless that there was an occasion when he did such a thing. Do you accept that?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure of your question.
I'm suggesting to you that the reason this letter was written was because he did enter Catholic schools for the purpose set out in the letter.
Oh, yeah.
My question to you is, having entered Catholic schools in the diocese for the purpose set out in the letter, Is that consistent or inconsistent with his faculties having been removed?
I didn't remove his faculties. He didn't have faculties.
Well, that's my point. He didn't have faculties. You understand they were removed by your predecessor, Bishop Manning. You understand that?
Yes.
My question is whether or not the event that's described in this letter, that is entering Catholic schools, was something that he had done prior to this letter being issued. Do you know?
Oh, I suppose so.
My question is then, is it the case that entering Catholic schools for that purpose was consistent or not consistent with him not having faculties?
Not necessarily.
I take it any layperson could offer to and be accepted to assist teachers in relation to teaching of religious matters in schools. Would that be right?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that properly.
Any layperson
Yes.
could offer their assistance to help with religious instruction in schools.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So in acting in this way, he didn't need faculties. He was just acting as any other member of the public might do.
Oh, he could, yes.
Yeah. But what the director was saying was he should not do this.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I take it he should not do it because it provided him with access to children.
You could put it that way, I suppose, but it means he had contact with people, and as we know from his general history, that's been described here several times, is he'd make contact with people, get to know them, and then later on he would contact them privately and all this sort of thing.
Now, can I show you tab 223? This is a email from you to Farrell in July 2000, and in that email you were wondering whether he might make himself available to go to a week's course in Sydney. Do you see that?
Yes.
Was that a course of treatment?
I'm trying to think.
It's referred in another email to a week's orientation course. Does that help?
It probably was that, yes.
Treatment?
No.
Orientation as to what?
Well, there were various courses being given to bring priests up to date or to make them available to deal with people in consultation or in, yes, and that sort of thing.
So even though he didn't have faculties in your diocese, you were involving him in the work of the church to the extent that you wanted him to go to an orientation course to assist him in dealing with people?
To take a course is not a question of approving of the man.
Well, I'm not suggesting it is, but he was sufficiently involved in the work of your diocese for you to ask him to attend an orientation course, which, as you say, enabled him to deal with people in consultation and that sort of thing.
Yes, if I asked him to do that sort of work.
Well, you did ask him to do it. You asked him to do the course.
But to do the course, yes.
Presumably that cost money from the diocese.
Pardon?
Presumably that cost money that the diocese paid.
Oh, probably. I can't say.
Now, coming over to tab 228. Now, this is a letter that was written by a person who has a pseudonym, Bishop, and there's a list in front of you which sets out the names of people with pseudonyms. Now, please be careful not to use the name and use only the pseudonym. Now, this letter was written by CPD, and if you look on the pseudonym list on the table in front of you, you'll see who CBD is. Now, there's no need to, indeed, do not read out his name, but you understand who CPD is? That's right.
I'm sorry? Yes, I do, yes.
And this is a letter from him addressed to Reverend Pell and copied to you.
I don't know about that. I don't remember seeing a copy of it.
No, you see that it is CC to you at the top of that page?
Yes, but I can't remember. I don't remember getting that letter.
You've read it, I take it? You've read it?
I can't say. You mean now, today? Or?
Well, to have said that you can't remember getting it, you must know what the letter says. Have you read this letter before?
No.
You haven't?
No.
Well, then how can you say you didn't get it?
Because of what the thing, it just rings no bell in my head at all that I saw this letter.
Well, you've only seen the first paragraph. Do you want to see the rest of the letter, Bishop? It's a letter of complaint
Yeah.
from CPD describing the sexual abuse he suffered from Farrell from 1982 to 1984.
Yes.
Do you remember getting that letter?
No, I don't remember getting that letter.
If we can go to the last page, the CBD in the last full paragraph says that he's prepared to meet with Reverend Pell, as he describes him, or an appropriate person to discuss his situation. You don't recall that letter?
I don't recall this letter.
I beg your pardon?
I don't recall this letter.
Now, if I can ask tab 232 to be placed on the screen. Now, this is a letter to CPD dated July 2002, and if we go to the second page of the letter, that's your signature, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you remember writing to CPD?
This particular letter?
Yes.
Oh, I must have, yes.
Now, if we can go back to the first page, you refer in that second last paragraph to, if we can have that on the screen, that Farrell had been forbidden to act as a priest since about 1992 and lives privately. You see that there?
Yes.
And then you indicate that you're prepared to meet with CPD. That's the next paragraph.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your question.
The next paragraph says that you were prepared to meet with CPD.
Yes.
Now, do you remember meeting with CPD?
Yes.
And what do you remember about the meeting?
Well, he came with his mother.
Is that all you remember about the meeting, that he came?
No, well, I mean, we discussed the accusations he made.
Mm-hmm. And?
Well, how do you mean, and what?
Well, I've asked you what you remember about the meeting. You've said he came with his mother.
Yes.
You've said we discussed the accusations he made.
Yes.
Is there anything else you remember about the meeting?
Well, not at the top of my head now. Maybe I should remember something, I don't know.
Was that the first time you had heard directly from a victim of Farrell about what he had done to them?
Yes.
What was your reaction to that, Bishop?
How do you mean my reaction to what?
What was your reaction to having heard directly from a victim of Farrell about what they had done to he had done to them for the first time?
Well, I just took it in that these things happened and it happened here.
I'm sorry? You just took it, these things had happened and it happened here?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
In this case with the CPD.
These things, by that you mean the sexual abuse of this person by Farrell?
In general, sexual interference with young people, yes.
So that happened and it just so happened to this person?
Well, it's happened to this person. I'd heard of these things before in other parts of the world.
that was your reaction to having heard it.
How do you mean the reaction?
Well, I'm asking you how you reacted to having heard that account, and you say that you'd heard of these things in other parts of the world and it happened to this person. That's the extent of your reaction to it?
Well, no, my further reaction, I made certain suggestions to CPD.
What suggestions did you make to CPD?
Well, I forget now. That should be in the letter somewhere, because there's another letter in which I suggest you go for a treatment, if you like, or therapy and so on.
Well, perhaps if we can have 235A. Now, this is headed draft letter at the top. And you've signed it, I think, at the bottom. And then there are 2 lines through paragraph 2. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember drafting this letter?
I'm sorry, did I?
Draft the letter.
I suppose I did. I can't remember whether I drafted or whether I'd helped to draft it.
Do you see in paragraph 2, you refer to you seek monetary compensation, whereas you seem to have satisfied yourself that compensation is due to you. You have in no way established to my satisfaction that I, as Bishop, should pay you compensation. Do you see that?
Yes.
Why don't you make a claim against the man who abused you?
Yes.
And then you refer to, should you bring yourself to take the matter of abuse to the police, the compensation matter will become clearer.
Yes.
Now, this is in 2002. Was it your approach in 2002 that it was necessary for a person to establish to your satisfaction as a bishop that you should pay the money?
What do you mean by paying money?
Well, paying compensation as you set out in this draft, or this draft has set out and you've signed it.
Towards healing does not mention compensation.
I beg your pardon?
Towards healing document.
Well, the document talks about compensation.
Which document?
The document's on the screen in front of you.
Well, exactly. I'm saying to you that the document on which one works towards healing does not mention compensation.
I'm not talking about towards healing, Bishop. I'm talking about this letter that you've signed in draft form.
Oh, what? I don't want to discuss compensation with him.
You didn't want to discuss compensation with him?
Yes, because it's not in towards healing that's something to do.
So you say that the draft letter referred to compensation and then you removed it because it was a matter for towards healing rather than for you? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Now, if we go to 235, this was a letter that was sent, in that it's not in draft form. And then in paragraph 2, you refer to him seeking monetary compensation and urge him to go to the police. And you say, I believe that compensation may become clearer if you do that. You see that?
Yes.
So was it your approach then that a police record or a complaint to the police was necessary in order to consider compensation?
I think I've already said that compensation is not part of towards healing. Now, it's necessary, I think, or I would always advise if people come to me and say I've been abused by Father so-and-so, that they take the matter to the police. Because there things will become clearer as to whom is responsible for what or what to do to whom and so on.
Now, while
Sorry, can I just understand? You say that when you were the bishop, the approach you took was that towards healing was not available as a process for any survivor to be given compensation. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying towards healing doesn't mention the compensation.
That's what I want to understand.
Yeah.
But are you also saying that before the church could consider accepting responsibility for someone having been abused, they needed to go to the police and there needed to be a prosecution?
Well, it's all part of the same process, you know. To go to the police is terribly important in cases of this kind.
Well, I understand that, but I want to know what you were thinking in terms of the church's responsibility. Are you saying that the church would not accept responsibility for any survivor having been abused unless they went to the police and there was a prosecution?
No. I think the process of assisting people who've been through abuse starts much earlier than that, but going to the police is part of it, a major part of it as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I understand that. Well, at what point was the church, as far as you were concerned, prepared to engage in a towards healing process in relation to a survivor who came to you?
Well, whatever it talks about reparation, it talks about counselling and all this kind of thing.
Well, and were you prepared to engage with someone in relation to those matters if they hadn't been to the police?
Well, part of being engaged with them in these matters would be to say it's important you go to the police, that there's an official record of this.
And if the person says, I don't want to go to the police, I don't want to become involved with the criminal law, did that mean, as far as you were concerned, they couldn't be involved in a towards healing process?
No, they can be, but they stymie the whole process.
How would they stymie the process?
Because there's no official record with the police of what happened or what they allege happened.
Well, that's what I was trying to work out. Are you saying that until they've been to the police, and as you say, there's a police record, then a person couldn't deal with the church through the towards healing process?
Oh, yes, they can.
So they didn't have to go to the police for the church to be prepared to provide them with the opportunity to go through towards healing?
A part of the towards healing is to encourage people to go to the police and report.
I understand that, but I just want to make sure we're on the same track. If someone has been abused, did they have to go to the police before, as far as you were concerned, towards healing could help them and provide them with compensation?
You see, that word compensation keeps on coming up.
Well, I need to understand what you were doing.
The towards healing mentions all sorts of things, as I've already said. Counselling.
Yeah, I understand that.
But it does not mention the word compensation.
What do you understand it to mention in terms of money?
But towards healing doesn't mention compensation.
So you don't think money was involved at all?
Dear what?
You don't think money was involved in the towards healing process at all? Is that what you're saying?
I still don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
Are you saying that as far as you understood it, no one could obtain any money through the towards healing process?
Well, not from me.
And as far as you were concerned, were you responsible for the towards healing process in Armidale?
Yes.
So anyone who was abused in Armidale could not get money through you from the church, is that right?
Well, not in the way you describe it, yes, no.
How could they?
How could they?
Yeah.
Well, you're making out that they have a right to ask.
No, I'm just asking, was there any means by which they could get money from the church if they'd been abused by one of the priests in Armidale?
But why would they want to get money from the church?
Because one of the church people, one of the ordained members of the church, had abused them.
Oh, I see. Well, that's, to me, is compensation.
And as far as you were concerned, no one could get it, is that right?
That's correct.
I think we might take lunch now.